So, James Howlett was born in 1832 in what would later be known as the Northwest Territories of Canada. In 1845, James lay sick in his bed, while Victor, who was currently visiting him, kept him company as James's father arrived to check in on him. A few moments later, Victor's father and John's groundskeeper, Thomas Logan, who was also having an affair with John Howlett's wife, entered the Howlett home, drunk, looking for James's mother, Elizabeth Howlett, and had a confrontation with John, which resulted in Thomas shooting John. James heard the gunfire, went to investigate, and found his father dead. It was under this grief-stricken incident that, in an act of vengeance, James's mutation began to manifest as he sprouted bone claws, slowly emerging from his fists and knuckles. In a wild rage, James roared in rage and fury and impaled Thomas using his claws. However, while impaling Thomas with his newly discovered bone claws, Thomas revealed that John wasn't James's real father. Much to James's horror, with his dying breath, Thomas revealed that he was James's true father by telling him he was also his son and Victor was his brother. After Thomas died, Elizabeth, horrified by James's mutation, cast her son out by calling him a freak as she questioned James as to what he was. Confused about what was happening to him, James fled and ran into the woods, with Victor following behind him. After running away, Victor, who was also a mutant, caught up and overtook James. Victor said that they were brothers and vowed to stick together and that they would look after each other no matter what, and this eventually led them to a life of rage and violence. As Victor was truly his own family and they shared a father, James started going by the name Logan. Over the next 128 years, as the two boys grew into men, Logan and Victor fought bravely together as soldiers for the United States in numerous wars. The wars the two brothers participated in throughout their years together included the American Civil War, World War I, World War II, and the Vietnam War, using their mutant powers. However, Victor grew increasingly violent and uncontrolled as time passed. Sometime in 1945, Logan transferred from the European front to the Pacific front, where he was captured by Japanese forces prior to August 9th and is sent to a POW camp near Nagasaki. During the Nagasaki bombing on August 9th, 1945, Logan saves the life of Ichiro Yashida, a young officer in the Imperial Japanese Army. After saving his life, Yashida thanks him and offers a Japanese samurai sword as a token of gratitude. Logan refuses, but says to hold on to it for him, promising to return for it in the future. Then, in 1962, while traveling the world searching for mutants to fight the Hellfire Club, a young Charles Xavier and Eric come across Logan in a bar. They introduce themselves, but before they could continue, he dismisses them. Then, during the Vietnam War in the 1970s, the last war Logan and Victor participated in, Victor attacked and attempted to rape and kill a young Vietnamese village woman. But when soldiers from his platoon and commanding officer try to stop him, Victor kills a senior officer and then brutally attacks the soldiers who tried to stop him. Logan comes to his aid and reluctantly assists Victor by releasing his claws. He prepares to defend his brother, ready to fight as they promised, revealing their gifts to the other men in their unit. For their grave insubordination, this incident led to Victor and Logan being sentenced to death and placed in front of a firing squad to be executed after decapitating a senior officer. They are shot by a firing squad, but they do not die, as their healing factors, which kept them alive, make it hard to kill them. They survived the execution and death sentence, and because of their unique regenerative healing abilities, both mutants were placed in a cell soon after. Logan and Victor were eventually brought to the attention of Major William Stryker, who visits and confronts them as he enters their cell. Stryker asks them to join his special team of mutants he is assembling as a way out of imprisonment. Victor and Logan accept and join other mutants, such as Wade Wilson, Agent Zero, Chris Bradley, Fred Dukes, and John Wraith, and they go on missions throughout the world. During one of their missions, while under Stryker's command, Team X is sent to search for and retrieve a mysterious meteorite, which is later discovered as adamantium. They attack a compound there, and after defeating the compound's security forces, they obtain a mysterious rock, which is later discovered as a meteorite fragment that fell from the sky as a meteor, and discover that it originates from a remote village. Upon arriving at the village, Stryker and the team interrogated nearby villagers to see if there were any other meteorites, and were informed that the rock fell from the sky as a meteor. Stryker wants more information and has Wade Wilson interrogate in his place because he speaks the language. When they threatened the village as to where the meteorite came from, the village chief refused to tell Stryker the origins of the meteorites, as they believed them to be sacred. After receiving no further answers, Stryker orders his team to attack the villagers by first ordering Victor to kill the chief. The whole village descended into chaos as Stryker's team started killing the civilians. However, when the mutants begin attacking a nearby village, Logan stops them before they can do so. After a brief argument with Victor, Logan quits the team, saying he can't kill innocent people as he was disgusted by the murders committed by his teammates. Stryker's willingness to kill innocent civilians, and Victor's acceptance of this. He promptly leaves and abandons Victor and the group before walking into the night and leaving, while ignoring Victor calling out to him. With his departure, the Team X disbands. Eventually, after everyone else left, only Agent Zero and Victor stayed faithful to Stryker. 6 years after leaving Team X, Logan is living in Western Canada, residing in a cabin high in the Canadian Rockies, working as a lumberjack, and living with a schoolteacher named Kayla. After many years of participating in warfare, Logan now desires a more quiet and tranquil life. Kayla manipulated him into a state of complacency with her power, calming him through the nightmares of the past. One day, Agent Zero and Stryker visit Logan while at work to question Logan's job payment as a lumberjack by asking if it pays 18 grand a year. Logan corrects him by saying his pay is actually 18.5 grand a year, before saying he hasn't had to kill anybody lately. Agent Zero asks if Logan is starting to miss it. Logan, getting irritated, says now he is, before Stryker breaks them up. Then, one night, Kayla told Logan about a spirit who was tricked into being parted forever from his lover. Stemming from her Native American ancestry, she recites a story to Logan about a spirit named Quequatsha, who fell in love with the moon, but was fooled by the trickster into stepping foot in the mortal world from which he could never return. Thus, the spirit, Quequatsha, was parted forever from the moon, was subsequently forced to look at the moon forever and never be with her again, howling at her whenever he saw her. One day, while Logan is at work, Kayla is attacked by Victor. Sensing Victor's presence in the area, he rushes to Kayla's abandoned car, but finds that he is too late for any kind of rescue. Kayla is dead and understands that this is Victor's doing. That evening, he finds Victor in a bar and, in a state of rage, lunges at him. After a brutal fight, Victor snaps off Logan's bone claws on his left hand before leaving. The next morning, he wakes up in an emergency room, where Stryker happens to be present. Stryker tells Logan he can help him exact revenge on Victor with an experimental procedure. Logan agrees to go through with it, but also warns that he is bent solely for revenge. Prior to the adamantium procedure, Logan asks for new dog tags with the name Wolverine on them as a reference to the story Kayla told him. Stryker binds Logan's bones with adamantium, and he flatlines afterwards. After a few moments, though, he revives and escapes the facility after overhearing Stryker order that his memories be erased so that his DNA could be used for an upcoming project. So Logan continues to flee until he finds a barn and hides in it. The elderly couple who own the barn offers him food and shelter. Although wary of him at first, they soon warm up to him, even giving Logan a jacket that belonged to their son and allowing him to take their motorcycle for a spin. However, just before offering him breakfast, Agent Zero kills the couple. The barn is bombed as Logan escapes on the bike. After a long and daring chase, he attacks Zero's helicopter and takes it down. After killing Zero, Logan attempts to locate the two remaining members of Team X and finds John Wraith and Fred Dukes in Las Vegas. Intent on killing Victor in revenge for Kayla's death and Stryker for his betrayal, Logan tries to inquire Dukes about Stryker's activities. A misunderstanding ensues, leading to a boxing match between the two. Logan ends up beating Dukes and interrogating him until he is told about a mutant and former prisoner named Remy, or as most people call him, Gambit. Logan and Wraith find Gambit in New Orleans and asks him about Stryker's Island, where mutants are being held hostage for Stryker's new project. Gambit, believing that Logan wants to take him back to the island, attacks him. Soon, Logan sees Wraith's dead body, with Victor crouching next to it, collecting samples of Wraith's DNA. Enraged, after knocking out Gambit, Logan engages Victor. While the brothers battle, Logan gains the upper hand and nearly prepares to kill Victor. However, Gambit, who regained consciousness during the battle, attacks Logan from a rooftop, allowing Victor to escape. After defeating Gambit, Logan clarifies his intentions and convinces him to take him to the island. With Gambit's help, Logan arrives at the island, which turns out to be 3 Mile Island. After Logan arrives on the island, he finds Stryker, who tells him about Deadpool and reveals that Kayla wasn't really killed. She is revealed to be alive and was reluctantly working for Stryker. As Victor is watching through the window from a nearby room, Wolverine was told that Victor and Stryker were subsequently working together to capture various mutants. They tricked Wolverine into agreeing to have adamantium bonded to his skeleton by claiming that Victor had gone rogue and had killed the woman Wolverine loved. She had at some point been recruited by Stryker for the purpose of seducing Logan and creating an incident where he was compelled to join the Weapon X program and participate in the adamantium procedure. After Logan discovers that Kayla is not only alive, but also working for William Stryker, he compares her to the trickster who played Logan as the fool. This hurt Logan deeply, and feeling betrayed after learning this, he decided to leave the facility and move on with his life. Then, Wolverine hears Kayla's screams and calls of distress and rushes back to her rescue and returns to engage and fight Victor yet again. Wolverine attacks Victor and they battle each other, with Logan ultimately gaining the upper hand. And after defeating him in combat, Wolverine manages to pin his half-brother down and is in a position to kill Victor. When Logan finally has the chance to decapitate and kill Victor, he doesn't, because Kayla intervenes and talks Logan out of it, as she had convinced him that he would be no better than Stryker, saying that Logan was not an animal while Victor taunted him. Logan, listening to Kayla's pleas, chose not to give in to his animal instincts and instead punches and knocks out Victor instead. Following the fight between Victor and Logan, Kayla said that she only did what Stryker wanted her to do because her sister, Emma Frost, is being held captive on the island. Kayla then told Logan that she faked her death in order to help release her sister Emma, and William Stryker broke his promise to release her. Despite taking part in faking her death as a way for Stryker to copy Wolverine's powers and test the adamantium, Kayla assures Logan that her feelings for him were genuine and their love was real. And she explains that Stryker has her sister in custody along with other mutants, some of whose powers were pooled into the Deadpool project. He agrees to help her. They then proceed to free the mutant prisoners. After freeing the imprisoned mutants while leading them out of the facility, Logan and the mutants are stopped and confronted by Deadpool. Logan ordered the others to find another way out so that he could engage this new abomination on his own. They clash as the other mutants flee. Using Chris Bradley's power, Stryker was able to control him to kill Wolverine. With the other powers he had from several other mutants, he was ready to fight and kill Wolverine. Logan climbs one of the nuclear reactor's cooling towers. Deadpool follows in an instant, using Wraith's teleportation ability. Logan puts forth his best effort, but is pinned down. Just as Deadpool is about to decapitate him, Victor shoves him away, and both of them fall into the reactor. Victor catches Logan, explaining to Logan that the only reason he saved him was so he could kill him himself by saying, "Nobody kills you but me." Logan and Victor eventually tag team and end up back to back, with Deadpool teleporting in front of each of them back and forth. Deadpool then manages to teleport to the other side of the reactor. During the fight, Deadpool's built-in optic blasts activate, threatening both Logan and Victor. As Deadpool fires his optic blasts, Victor attacks Deadpool as he fires on Logan with his optic blasts. Logan falls over the edge of the reactor as Victor is caught jumping at Deadpool and shot back. Logan climbs back onto the reactor. Just before Deadpool can kill Victor, Logan runs, jumps and slashes him through the neck, successfully decapitating him. He holds his neck as Logan kicks him into the nuclear reactor cooling tower. After defeating Deadpool, Logan helps Victor out of the hole and coldly informs Victor that despite his help, their relationship is over, and tells him that they're done, with nothing being changed, as Logan states he wants nothing more to do with him. Victor said they can never be finished, and simply reminded Logan that they are still brothers and told him that brothers should always look out for each other. Victor then jumped off the side of the reactor cooling tower. As the reactor starts to tumble, Logan follows, collapsing as he lands. Just before a piece of the reactor lands on Logan, Gambit saves him by breaking up the piece. Gambit and Logan then briefly split up, with Gambit going to help the children and Logan attending to Kayla. Logan carries her a few steps before Stryker shoots him in the back. In a feral rage, he turns and sprints at Stryker. As he is in mid-leap, Logan is shot in the head by Stryker with adamantium bullets and falls to the ground, unconscious, damaging his brain and losing much of his long-term memory. Just as Stryker is about to kill Kayla, she grabs his ankle and, using her power, orders him to leave before dying. As Logan awakes, he has forgotten everything and everyone, including Gambit and Kayla. However, when he sees Kayla's corpse, he shuts her eyes. So Gambit and Logan soon go their separate ways. Then, years later, Logan is seen as a cigar-smoking loner who wanders from place to place in Canada. He participates in cage fights to make money, taking advantage of the enhanced durability that his adamantium skeleton and healing factor grant him. Later, in the bar hosting one of his cage fights, he is watched by Marie, now going by the name Rogue, who walks inside a building where a crowd is cheering at a caged wrestling match. A match just ended, and it seems that it was not the winner's first victory that night. A new wrestler enters the cage, and a new battle begins. At first, the new person seems to have the upper hand, but then the winner recovers at amazing speed and fights back, easily defeating the new person in mere seconds. The announcer announces the winner and still champion, Wolverine. Later that night, after the fights are over, she is sitting down at the bar quietly. Wolverine comes and sits near her, ordering a beer. He looks at her as she seems out of place in the bar. In the background, a news report is telling about the upcoming gathering of world leaders in New York and that they will be talking about many topics, including the mutant phenomenon. The wrestler from earlier approaches Wolverine and demands his money, saying that no man can take a beating like that without a mark, which means he must be a mutant. Wolverine did not budge, and the wrestler pretends to give up, but then pulls a knife and goes to attack. Marie screams to Wolverine to look out, and he jumps out of his chair and unsheathes his razor-sharp metal claws at him. The barman threatens him with a gun, but he takes him on as well. Wolverine then leaves the bar, and Marie runs after him after she soon discovers that Wolverine is a mutant. Thinking that he would understand, she gets into his truck, hides in the trailer of his truck, and Wolverine drives away. Later, on the road, Wolverine notices something in the back. He stops the truck, gets out, and checks the cart, where he soon finds Marie hiding. She apologizes and says that she needed a ride. After he discovers Marie, Wolverine kicks her out by ordering her out to the cold and begins to re-enter the truck. She yells that she saved his life, but he says that she did not and starts driving away. Wolverine keeps driving, and after a few meters, guilt makes him stop. Marie then gets inside before he keeps driving, thus allowing her to accompany him. During the drive, they begin to converse and slowly form a father-daughter relationship. After he gives her something to eat, she introduces herself as Rogue. She asks him questions about his life, but he does not answer. He notices that she is cold and turns on the heater, telling her to put her hands on it, and almost touches her hands, but she pulls them away. At first, he takes it as fear, but then she explains that when people come into skin-to-skin contact with her, they get hurt. She looks at his hands and asks him if it hurts when his claws come out. He answers that it hurts every time, and then asks her what kind of name Rogue is. She asks him the same question about his name, Wolverine, and he tells her that his name is Logan. She tells him that her name's Marie, and then advises him to wear his seatbelt. He tells her that he doesn't need driving tips, but just then they slam into a tree branch, and Logan is thrown through the front shield a few dozen meters away into the snow. The truck starts burning as Rogue wakes and sees Wolverine get up. He walks back and asks her if she's all right, to which she answers that she's stuck. He walks over to help her, but then his hyperactive senses pick up the scent of Sabretooth. Suddenly, Sabretooth jumps out of the woods and throws Wolverine. He then throws him again on the truck and walks to him, to the fear of Rogue, who is already terrified of the fire in the truck. Then, two figures show up behind Sabretooth, who are Cyclops and Storm. Cyclops puts his hand to his visor and shoots a powerful optic blast at Sabretooth. He then uses his beams to release Rogue, and they grab her and Wolverine and run away seconds before the truck explodes. After Cyclops and Storm successfully came to Wolverine and Rogue's rescue, they take the rescued pair to the X-Mansion. Later, Wolverine is lying unconscious in the X-Men's base. Jean Grey is taking care of him. She tries giving him an injection, but just then he wakes up. Thinking her an enemy, he manages to escape her easily and runs away through the tunnels of Xavier's mansion. He is not sure which way to choose, but then he starts hearing voices in his head. Charles Xavier telepathically guides him. He finds a closet with clothes and takes a shirt before an elevator opens right next to him. He enters and it closes on itself, taking him to the upper floors. He hides from some mutant kids running around and then keeps running straight into a classroom where Xavier is teaching a class. Xavier greets him and then finishes the lesson. The students leave, and then one of them, a girl named Kitty, runs back because she forgot her purse. She then exits by phasing herself through the door. Logan looks confused, and the professor introduces himself as Charles Xavier, and he offers Logan breakfast. Logan asks where he is, and Xavier answers that he is in Westchester. He was attacked, and his people brought him there for medical attention. Logan says that he doesn't need any medical attention and asks where Rogue is. Xavier answers that she is there too, and that she is fine. Just then, Logan's rescuers enter. Xavier introduces them as Storm and Cyclops. Scott sends out his hand to shake hands with Logan, but Logan does not respond. Xavier tells him that they saved his life, and just then, Jean enters. Xavier introduces her as well, and then tells Logan that he is in his school for gifted youngsters, and that he is safe there from Magneto. Logan asks, "What's a Magneto?" And Xavier answers that Magneto is a very powerful mutant, and that the mutant who attacked him is an associate of Magneto's called Sabretooth. Logan thinks the whole thing is ridiculous and starts leaving, roughly telling Scott to get out of his way. Xavier then tells him that he can help him figure out who he is. Telepathically, Xavier says to him that it's been 15 years since Logan lost his memory, showing that his telepathy can help Logan remember his past. Intrigued, Logan asks about what the place was. Xavier tells Logan more about the school, convincing him that it is the best place for Rogue to be. He then tells him that the school is only a cover and that the lower levels are completely different. Xavier shows Logan the hangar containing the X-Men's supersonic jet. He explains that when he was a boy, he discovered he could control people's minds, and when he was 17, he met a young man named Eric Lenscher, who had the ability to control magnetism. Believing that humanity would never accept them, Eric grew angry at humanity and became Magneto. Xavier offers Logan a deal, 48 hours to discover why Magneto is after him, in exchange to help uncover his forgotten past. In the X-Mansion, John is running tests on Logan. He apologizes for hurting her earlier and tries to flirt with her, to which Jean responds with a sharp look and promptly puts him into the scanning machine. Later at night, Logan has seemingly accepted Xavier's offer to help him. Jean shows Logan his room where he will be staying for the night. Logan tries to resume flirting with Jean. He is jealous of her relationship with Scott and jokingly asks her if her gift is to put up with that guy. Jean answers that she is telekinetic. She can move things with her mind. Logan asks, "What kind of things?" and she closes the closet door to demonstrate. She then says that she also has some telepathic abilities, though not nearly as powerful as the professor does. Logan tells Jean to read his mind, but she initially refuses. After a moment of silence, though, she agrees and puts her hands to his head. She sees images of fire and the operation he went through, and stops. Logan eagerly holds her hands and asks her with great anticipation to tell him what she saw, but just then, Scott enters. Jean leaves slightly embarrassed, and Scott and Logan taunt each other about Jean and about how Scott had to rescue Logan. Before he leaves, Scott tells Logan to stay away from his girl. Later that night, Logan is sleeping in his room, having a nightmare about when the adamantium was attached to his skeleton. Rogue enters and tries to wake him up, but as he wakes up, still tense from the nightmare, he screams and his claws unsheathe in her chest. Shocked, he retracts them, leaving 3 holes in her body, and she quivers. He starts yelling for help hysterically, and she put up her hand and touches his cheek. Storm, Jean, Scott, and some kids enter just in time to see her wounds heal and Logan pass out. Jean and Scott rush to help Logan, and Rogue starts apologizing and saying that it was an accident. She leaves the room, and the other children step away from her panikedly. They look at her with apprehension, though Iceman just looks concerned. Later, Logan wakes up with Xavier sitting next to him. He asks the professor if Rogue is fine, and he answers that she will be all right. Wolverine asks what happened, and Xavier answers that whenever Rogue touches someone, she absorbs their energies. In the case of mutants, she absorbs their gifts. In the case of Logan, she absorbed his ability to heal. Logan says that he feels like she almost killed him, and Xavier says that if she held on any longer, she could have. In the underground part, Xavier and Cyclops are trying to figure out what Magneto wants with Wolverine. Xavier picks up that Scott does not like Logan. Just then, Logan and Storm walk in, and Logan asks where Rogue is. Xavier, after a short mind scan, says that she is gone. A few minutes later, Xavier, Scott, Jean, Storm, and Logan enter a secured room, and Xavier welcomes Logan to Cerebro. Cerebro is a big round room with a bridge leading to the machine. Xavier explains that Cerebro amplifies his powers, allowing him to track mutants over large distances. That is how he intends to find Rogue. Logan asks why he just does not use it to find Magneto, and Xavier tells him that Magneto somehow found a way to shield himself from the machine. Logan asks how he would know how to do that, and Xavier says that he helped him build it. Then he puts the Cerebro helmet on his head, and after the others exit, starts the search. Outside, Logan asks Jean if she has ever used Cerebro, and she answers she has not, because it takes a certain degree of control, and for someone like her, it is dangerous. Inside, Xavier manages to locate Rogue at the train station after a short search. Logan starts leaving to find her, but Xavier stops him, saying that if he leaves the mansion, Magneto will capture him. Instead, he sends Cyclops and Storm to find her. In the garage, Scott and Storm prepare to leave, when Scott notices that his motorcycle is missing. On the road, Logan is riding Scott's motorcycle. In the train station, Rogue is sitting on a train, waiting for it to leave. She watches other people touching each other freely and feels sad that she will never get to feel human touch again. Logan finds her and sits next to her. They apologize to each other about what happened the previous night, and he asks her why she is running again. She tells him that a boy in school told her the professor was mad at her. While on the train, Rogue asks Wolverine if he thinks she should go back. He answers that he thinks she should follow her instincts. After a pause, she tells him about the first boy she ever kissed, David, who ended up in a coma for 3 weeks, and she can still feel him inside her head, and Logan too. Logan hugs her through her shirt and convinces Rogue to stay with Xavier by telling her that he thinks Xavier is one of the few people who can understand what she's going through and that he really wants to help her, thus promising to take care of her. The train starts moving, and Logan convinces her to give these geeks another shot. When the Brotherhood arrives at the train station, Rogue's train stops moving, and the lights go out. Everybody screams as Wolverine looks in horror as Magneto uses his powers to literally slice the train open. Logan pops his claws, and Magneto says that he must be Wolverine, the man with metal running through his body. He uses his powers to lift Logan into the air and hurt him as Rogue screams at him to stop. Logan asks Magneto why does he want him, and Magneto answers that it's not him he wants. Logan is horrified to realize that Magneto is really after Rogue. Magneto incapacitates Wolverine by tossing him away, then knocks Rogue unconscious with a tranquilizer dart and captures her. She soon becomes a component in Magneto's machine on the Statue of Liberty. Back at the mansion, Logan is washing his face. He is angry at the professor for saying he wanted him, and Xavier apologizes, saying he made a terrible mistake, as Magneto's helmet is somehow designed to stop his telepathy. Logan leaves angrily to find her alone, but Storm tries to convince him to help them and fight with them. Logan declines, saying he does not want to help a world that hates him. He then says that Magneto's right, and there is a war coming, and asks Storm if she is sure she is on the right side. She answers that at least she has chosen a side. He opens the door to leave, and finds Senator Kelly standing on the other side, looking for Dr. Jean Grey. Later, underground, Kelly is lying on a table. Logan and Jean are standing there too. Xavier approaches him and introduces himself. Kelly says that he was afraid to go to a regular hospital, and Xavier completes his sentence, saying that he was afraid they would treat him like a mutant. He tells him that they are not all that he thinks, and Kelly tells him to tell that to the ones who did this to him. Xavier asks Kelly to relax and starts reading his mind. He enters his memory of Magneto, turning him into a mutant, and Mystique helping him out of the machine. Magneto looks tired and weak from the process. Back in reality, a short while later, Xavier, Scott, Jean, and Logan are in a room upstairs. Xavier explains that Magneto uses a machine that produces radiation that triggers mutation in ordinary human beings. Jean continues, saying that the mutation is unnatural and Kelly's body is rejecting it. His cells are breaking down. Scott asks what the radiation will do to mutants, and Xavier answers that nothing, but it could seriously harm humans. Logan asks what Magneto wants with Rogue, and Xavier answers that he does not know. Annoyed, Logan turns to leave again, but then Scott finds the answer. The machine drew its power from Magneto, and it nearly killed him. He deduces that Magneto wants Rogue to absorb his power so she can do it in his place, allowing him to live. Storm enters Xavier's study just in time to break an argument between Scott and Logan and informs them that Senator Kelly is dead. Xavier tells them that he will go find Rogue and orders the men to settle it. Cyclops, Jean, Storm, and Wolverine discuss their battle plans. They understand Magneto's plan now completely, and they know Magneto is not aware of the fact that his machine kills. They know that if he gives Rogue enough power, he'll kill everybody in New York City. They plan to land on Liberty Island and spoil his plans. Logan asks what about Harbor Patrol, and Scott answers that if they have anything that can find their jet, they deserve to catch them. They leave in the Blackbird as the students watch in awe. Scott flies the jet, and when they reach the bridge, they land on the water. The Blackbird lands and the X-Men get out. They look up and see the machine on top of the torch. As they pass through the metal detector, it beeps on Logan, but he pops in claws in it. Cyclops turns towards him with an annoyed expression, and Wolverine sheathes the two outer claws, essentially flipping him off. Scott smiles and Jean rolls her eyes. They start walking carefully in the hall, but Toad and Mystique are already waiting for them. Logan's senses pick on them, and he tells the others that there is someone there, but he does not know where, and says, "Keep your eye open," as a joke at Scott's expense. Out of nowhere, another Wolverine shows up and starts battling Logan, and the others aren't sure anymore who's the real deal and who's the imposter. They both pop their claws and start slicing the place. Eventually, Mystique shifts back to her true form and manages to outmaneuver Wolverine. Later on, Storm approaches Logan and asks if it is him. He silences her, uses his sense of smell, and tells her that the other one is not far away. She says that they have to regroup, and he says that there is a problem. She is not part of the group, and then unsheathes his claws in her stomach. She morphs to Mystique and then falls to the ground. He finds Scott and Jean, and Scott tells him to prove that it is really him, to which Logan simply answers, "You're a dick," which Scott thinks is proof enough. Storm shows up upstairs and they follow her up. They see the torch, and suddenly Logan tells them all to get out of there. Cyclops asks what the problem is, and Logan says that he cannot move. He floats in the air and gets pinned to the wall. Metal pieces fly and hook the others to the walls too, despite Scott's attempts to blast them. Cyclops is hooked in a way that his visor is directed at Jean's head, preventing him from shooting. Magneto floats down and aims Logan's hands to his chest, preventing him from popping his claws. Sabretooth joins them and removes Scott's visor, forcing him to close his eyes. Scott orders Storm to fry him, but Magneto reminds him that it's not a good idea to send bolted lightning into a huge conductive. Magneto explains his motives to the X-Men, and then they hear Rogue crying for help. Wolverine tells him that if he was really so righteous, it would have been him in the machine. Magneto just flies up to the machine as Rogue continues to scream for help. Logan uses all his might to release himself with the claws, seemingly hurting himself, and Jean yells his name in worry. Sabretooth approaches his body, and just then Logan leaps at him and pops his claws in his stomach. Sabretooth seems to share Wolverine's healing factor, and they start battling on the statue's head. During the battle, Wolverine recovers his dog tags. Sabretooth throws Wolverine off the statue, but he manages to cling on and jump up. He beats Sabretooth and hears Rogue scream in pain. He falls down and sticks his claws to the wall to hang on it, almost killing Scott and Jean, who are on the other side of the wall. Sabretooth thinks he is dead and walks to Storm, only for Wolverine to jump back in with Cyclops' visor. Jean tells Scott that when she tells him, he should open his eyes. The torch smashes, and the machine begins to work. Jean telekinetically places the visor on Scott's eyes and says, "Now!" and he shoots, blasting Sabretooth through the wall, who crashes into a boat anchored off Liberty Island. He asks Cyclops if he can blast the machine, but Scott says that he will kill her. Cyclops asks Storm if she can lift him up, but she says she cannot control it like that. He could fly right over the torch. Logan tells her to fly him. If he does not make it, at least Cyclops could still blast it. Cyclops agrees and orders Jean to try to steady Logan with her telekinesis. With their combined efforts, the two manage to direct Logan to the top of the machine. The energy field starts spreading and Wolverine jumps inside. He tries to slash Rogue's chains, but Magneto stops him with his power. Cyclops puts his hand on his visor, but Jean asks him to wait. The X-Men ultimately save her before the machine can stretch her power any further. Cyclops sees a chance and decides to take it, managing to blast Magneto. Free to move, Wolverine slashes the machine, stopping the field before it mutates anyone. He cuts Rogue's chains and holds her. She isn't moving and notices the white streak in her hair. He touches her cheek, attempting to give her his regenerative powers, trying to get her to heal in order to save her life. At first, it doesn't seem to work, and Logan begins to despair, thinking Rogue is dead. Suddenly, a multitude of wounds begin to appear across his face, and blood drips out of several stab wounds. Rogue suddenly wakes up, and Logan falls to the ground, unconscious, with gashes all over his face and chest. Back in the mansion, Logan wakes up to find Jean standing by him. He asks her how did they do, and she shows him that Xavier is lying on a table next to his. Later, she checks on Logan and finds that all his wounds have healed. He wakes up, and she tells him that what he did was very brave. He asks if it worked, and she says that it did, and that Rogue's fine. He begins to tell her how he feels about her, but her reaction makes it evident that, while Logan's heart may belong to her, hers belongs to Scott. Logan changes the subject, asking how the professor is. She tells him that he's fine. Later, the professor tells Logan that there's an abandoned military compound in the Canadian Rockies close to where they found him, and that he might find some answers there. He asks Logan if he's going to say goodbye to the kids. Rogue spots Logan leaving and rushes to talk to him. He tells her that he's got some things to take care of in the north. She says that she doesn't want him to go, and he says that he'll be back, leaving her with his dog tags, something to remember him by when he returns. Wolverine then leaves the mansion on Cyclops' motorcycle, heading to Alkali Lake. Later, at Alkali Lake in Canada, Wolverine is walking in the snow. He sees the military compound that Professor X was talking about. At the gate, he sees a white wolf. He enters, but finds that nothing is left but the walls that once surrounded the structure. It is now abandoned and demolished, much to his disappointment. He then returns to the X mansion. Rogue hears Cyclops' motorcycle and happily runs to the entrance to see Logan returning home. They hug and greet each other, and then Rogue introduces Bobby to Logan as her boyfriend. They shake hands, and Bobby tells him to call him Iceman as he slightly freezes Logan's hand. Logan then starts teasing the two about how they get along physically. Bobby answers that they're still working on that. Suddenly, Storm comes down the stairs and welcomes Logan home, saying that he came just in time. They need a babysitter. Jean comes down after her and greets Logan. Jean explains to Logan that she and Storm are heading to Boston and says that they won't be gone long. The professor wants them to track down a mutant who attacked the president. He starts flirting with her when Scott walks down the staircase and asks him if he found what he was looking for. Logan answers him, and Jean kisses Scott goodbye. With Jean gone, Logan tells Scott that his bike needs gas as he tosses him the keys. Scott replies that Wolverine can fill it up himself before tossing the keys back to him. In Cerebro, the professor is getting ready to find the mutant attacker. Wolverine enters, and the professor welcomes him back, but not before telling him to put out his cigar. Logan, looking for a place to put it out, finally decides to put it out on his palm. Luckily, the wound quickly heals. He asks Xavier if he wants him to leave. Xavier tells him to stand still. Everything gets dark, and then millions of dotted lights appear. Xavier explains that these lights represent every living person in the world. The white lights are human, the red are the mutants. Through Cerebro, he's connected to them. Logan changes the subject and says that he found the base in Alkali Lake, but there was nothing there. Xavier, seemingly ignoring Logan, says that the broken line represents the mutant who attacked the president. He's been having a hard time getting a lock on him. Logan asks if he can just concentrate harder, and Xavier answers that he can, but it would kill the mutant they are trying to find. Just then, the mutant stops running, and his voice is heard, praying in German. Xavier leaves Cerebro, and Logan asks him to read his mind again. Xavier says that the results will be the same as before, as the mind is not a box that can simply be unlocked and opened. He has no doubt that Logan's amnesia, his adamantium skeleton, and the claws are all connected, but sometimes the mind needs to discover things for itself. Before wheeling out, he asks Logan to watch over the kids that night, as he and Scott are going to visit an old friend. In the Institute, Logan is again having a nightmare about his past and about what Xavier told him earlier in Cerebro, and he wakes up sweaty. He walks downstairs and hears the TV on. One of the students, Jones, is sitting in front of the television and changing channels by blinking. Jones asks him if he can't sleep, and Logan jokingly asks, "How can you tell?" To which the kid simply answers the obvious, "'Cause you're awake." Wolverine asks him what about him, and Jones answers that he doesn't sleep. Logan walks to the kitchen and finds Bobby eating ice cream. He opens the fridge and asks him if they got any beer, to which Bobby answers that it's a school. Wolverine asks if that's a no, and Bobby says it is. He asks if they got anything other than chocolate milk, and Bobby answers they got soda. Logan takes a bottle of soda and hands it to Bobby, who softly blows ice into the bottle to cool it before Logan drinks it. Logan asks Bobby how long he's been at the mansion. Bobby answers, "A couple of years." He asks if his parents just sent him off to mutant school. He answers that they think he is attending a prep school. Logan changes the subject to Bobby's relationship with Rogue, and Bobby tells him that it's hard because he wants to be close to her, but can't. All of a sudden, during their conversation, Logan's acute senses pick up on the intruder's footsteps. He gets up and hushes Bobby. Logan leaves the kitchen as a soldier sneaks in, almost shooting Bobby from behind, but Logan grabs him out in time. Siren, at the sight of the soldiers, releases a strong sonic scream heard throughout the school, shattering all the windows, waking up the other students, and making everyone shut their ears with their hands. The soldier in the kitchen tries firing all over the place, but Bobby ducks in time. Logan goes into berserker rage and pops his claws into the soldier's chest, killing him in front of Bobby's eyes. Logan and Bobby leave the kitchen and spot some soldiers. Logan tells Bobby to stay put and takes out the soldiers. Logan keeps taking out soldiers as Bobby runs to the elevator to go and find Rogue. Logan finds Colossus and hands him Jones, who Logan found unconscious. Peter says he can help him, but Logan tells him to help the kids. After Colossus and Jones enter the passage, Logan surprises more soldiers. Soldiers run in front of Iceman, Rogue, and Pyro, but Logan jumps at them and quickly takes them out with his claws. They run from some soldiers and enter an elevator, but Logan leaves right before it closes to confront the soldiers. Suddenly, Stryker's voice is heard, telling them not to shoot him yet. Stryker calls him by his code name and says that it's the last place he expected to find him, and that he hasn't seen him in over 15 years. Stryker is himself surprised to see Wolverine, the man he had worked with, experimented on, and severely injured decades earlier. Logan doesn't remember Stryker and asks him who he is. Before he can answer, though, a thick shield of ice separates them. Rogue and Bobby call Logan to come. Wanting to get answers, he tells them to go. He'll be fine, but Rogue says that they won't. Stryker bombs the ice, but by then, Logan and the kids are already heading to the garage and getting into Cyclops' car. Pyro wants to drive, but Logan drives instead. Rogue is in the passenger seat and the boys are in the back. Logan starts the car with his claws and they take off. The soldiers, meanwhile, get to the underground tunnels. On the road, Pyro asks what just happened, and Logan answers that his name is Stryker, but he can't remember who he is. Pyro starts the CD player, but instead, a communicator comes out. Wolverine says they should head to Boston, since that's where Storm and Jean were going. Bobby says that his parents live in Boston, where they can seek refuge to rest and regain their bearings. While in the car, Rogue returns Wolverine's dog tag, which was given to her before he left for Alkali Lake. In the Drake residence, Bobby and the others enter, and Bobby calls for his family. Nobody's home, and Bobby tells John not to burn anything, as he goes to find clothes for everyone. Downstairs, Logan tries to contact Jean through Scott's communicator, but it's not working. In the kitchen, Logan takes a bottle of beer from the fridge, and after sensing something near him, he pops his claws in front of a cat. The cat isn't scared, as it starts licking Logan's claws. He hears the door open and retracts the claws as Bobby's parents and brother enter and find him. The father, William Drake, asks him who he is as Bobby rushes down the stairs and introduces him as Professor Logan. He says there's something he needs to tell them. In the Drakes' living room, Bobby finishes telling his parents and brother about his mutation. Pyro is constantly playing with his lighter. Bobby's mother, Madeline Drake, starts asking her son when he first discovered he was a mutant, but can't bring herself to say it. Pyro completes her sentence. William Drake asks him to understand that they thought Bobby was going to a school for the gifted, and Rogue tells him that Bobby is gifted. Madeline tells Bobby that they still love him, but these mutant problems are complicated. Logan cuts her off mid-sentence and asks about mutant problems. William asks him what is he a professor of, and he answers, art. Rogue suggests that Bobby show his family what he can do, and Bobby freezes his mother's cup of coffee, saying that he can do a lot more than that. Madeline is shocked, and Pyro seems rather amused by this whole conversation, almost mocking the parents' attitude. The demonstration is about all that Bobby's brother Ronnie can take, and he leaves the living room angrily. Madeline says that this is all her fault, but Pyro again abuses the parents, saying that it's been discovered that males are the ones who carry the mutant gene and pass it on, so it's William's fault. Ronnie, listening from upstairs, calls the police. Cyclops' communicator beeps, and Logan picks it up on the porch. On the porch, Logan tells Jean that no one's left in the Institute. Storm asks what about the children, and Logan answers that some of them escaped, but he's not sure about the rest. Jean tells him that they haven't been able to reach the professor or Scott either. He tells them that he's in Boston with Bobby Drake's family, and the women head there. He tells them to make it fast and hangs up. He goes back inside and tells the kids that they have to go now. In a hurry, they all step out. Logan claws out, as they find that the house is surrounded by police cars. An officer tells him to drop the knives and put his hands in the air. Logan asks what's going on, and Bobby is frustrated to realize that his brother called the police. From his bedroom window, Ronnie is watching everything. On the porch, two officers break in and tell Bobby's parents to stand by the wall. Logan tells the officers that this is just a misunderstanding. They order him again to put the knives down. He tells them he can't. He puts his arm up in front of an officer, trying to reason with him, but the frightened officer shoots him in the forehead, and he drops. While Wolverine was unconscious, John nearly torches Bobby's house to the point where Rogue was forced to use her powers to stop him. The fire all around them stops, and he falls to his knees. Bobby watches as the wound on Logan's forehead heals and the bullet comes out. Just then, the jet lands in the yard, and the mutants walk to it as none of the officers dare to hit them. On the jet, the four mutants sit down. Wolverine asks who the new guy is. Kurt answers and tells him that in the Munich circus, he was known as the Incredible Nightcrawler. They take off in a hurry, as Bobby is still shocked and sad at his parents' and brother's reactions. On the jet, Jean tells Wolverine that they're close to the mansion. Just then, Storm detects two signals approaching fast. Indeed, two small military jets are tailing them and ordering them to descend in 10 seconds. The jets give their orders again, and when Storm doesn't comply, they prepare to fire. Storm tries to maneuver and get away, and then her eyes begin to glow white. The sky turns dark and small tornadoes appear in the air. It works with one of the jet, and it drops, but the other one manages to fire two torpedoes before the pilot jumps with his parachute. Storm stops her power, but then spots the torpedoes. This time, it's Jean's eyes turn to glow orange, and she gets one of the torpedoes off track with her telekinesis. She can't get the other one in time, though, and it hits them, blowing a hole in the jet as they begin to lose altitude. Rogue, who isn't wearing her seatbelt, screams as she is sucked through the hole and falls in the air. Bobby and Logan scream after her, but it's Kurt who saves the day, teleporting next to her, grabbing her, and teleporting her back inside. Still, the jet is falling rapidly, until suddenly the hole closes by itself and the jet stops in mid-air, meters from the ground. Storm asks Jean if she did it, and she says it wasn't her. On the ground, Magneto and Mystique are laughing, with Magneto humorously saying, "When will these people learn how to fly?" That night, the mutants set up a camp with a fire. By the fire, Magneto tells the X-Men that their foe is Colonel William Stryker, and he invaded their mansion for one purpose. He wanted Cerebro, or enough of it, to build one of his own. Jean says that it doesn't make any sense because he'll need the professor to operate it, and Magneto says that that's probably the only reason his old friend is still alive. Jean and Storm get worried, realizing the disaster potential, and Wolverine asks what they're so worried about. Magneto explains to him that when Cerebro is working, Charles's mind is connected to every living person on the planet. If he were forced to concentrate hard enough on a particular group, mutants, for example, he could kill them all. Storm asks how Stryker knows where to find Cerebro in the first place, and Magneto answers that he told him. Jean wants to know more about Stryker, and Magneto says that he's a military scientist who spent his whole life trying to solve the mutant problem, and says that Wolverine has a more intimate perspective, as his adamantium skeleton was created by Stryker. Wolverine doesn't understand why the professor didn't tell him, and Magneto says that Xavier thought he was smart enough to discover it on his own and gives him more credit than he deserves. Storm asks what he needs them for, and Magneto says that Mystique has discovered plans for a base Stryker has been operating for over a decade, and that's where he's building the second Cerebro, but they don't know where this base is, and he believes one of them might know. Wolverine tells him that the professor already tried, but Magneto says that he wasn't talking about him. He looks up to see Nightcrawler sitting on a branch above them. A few minutes later, Jean scans Kurt's mind and sees horrible sights, very similar to the ones seen in Wolverine's mind, including an operation. After she finishes, she says that Stryker is at Alkali Lake, but Logan says that's where the professor sent him, and there's nothing left. Jean explains that there's nothing left on the surface because the base is underground. Later, Logan and Jean are alone. He asks her how she's doing, and she says she's worried about Scott. He tells her that that was some display of power up in the jet, but she says that obviously it wasn't enough. He puts his hand on her, but she says she loves Scott, and that girls flirt with the dangerous guy. They don't take him home. They marry a good guy. He kisses her, but she stops him after a few seconds, asking him not to make her do this, and leaves. Kurt talks to Mystique and asks if it is true she is a shapeshifter. Mystique affirms that she is a shapeshifter, but ultimately prefers remaining in her natural form when possible. Logan is looking down at his dog tag, when suddenly Jean enters and kisses him. Suddenly, Logan's face takes on a suspicious look. He discovers the scars he caused on Mystique when he stabbed her. Jean shifts back to Mystique and says to him, "No one's ever left a scar quite like you," while Logan sarcastically says to her, "What do you want an apology?" Mystique shifts a few more times to Jean, Rogue, and Storm. Logan kicks Mystique, angry that she knows he's attracted to Jean. Mystique shifts to Stryker, then leaves. The following morning, they all fly in the jet. There, they all take their uniforms. The kids complain that they don't get uniforms, and Logan says that theirs are on order. They'll arrive in a few years. Outside in the jet, the X-Men are planning the operation using a holographic topographic map of the base. They see that Stryker can easily flood the spillway if they go inside. Storm asks Nightcrawler if he can teleport them in, but he says he has to see where he's teleporting. Otherwise, he might end up in a wall. Wolverine offers to go, saying that he thinks Stryker wants him alive. Magneto says that whoever enters has to know how to operate the place, and looks at Mystique. At Alkali Lake, Jean discovers that Stryker's base is underground. Mystique, impersonating Wolverine, infiltrates the base and tricks Stryker's troops into opening a gateway for the X-Men to enter. In the control room, Mystique watches as the doors explode. It's not the soldiers, though, but the mutants, and they enter. She shows them a map of the base, with a large round room called Cerebro. Logan, apart from the others, sees Stryker on a screen. He hears the others planning to part. Storm and Nightcrawler will get the kids. Jean, Magneto, and Mystique will go to shut down Cerebro. Storm notices that Logan's gone. Wolverine walks down a stairway and finds the room of his nightmares, what seems to be a surgery room. In the middle, there is a green tube of liquid of some sort. In the room's X-ray pictures of skulls and claws are hanged. Logan sees another flash from his pastimes in this room of himself lying in the tube. He keeps looking around and finds a small bathtub-like pool of liquid adamantium. Next to it are needles, and he sees a flash of his operation. He looks at the tube and sees a flash of himself running away from it naked and seeing his claws for the first time. Stryker and Lady Deathstrike enter, and Stryker starts explaining to him how he has to keep the adamantium hot and liquid because once it cools, it's indestructible. Stryker leaves and tells Wolverine that he used to think he was one of a kind, but he was wrong. Logan runs after him, but Yuriko blocks his exit and tosses him across the room. He pops his claws and then watches in shock as she pulls out adamantium claws of her own. She leaps at him and slices him across the face, and they start battling, slicing each other, with her having the upper hand. When she throws him at a wall and runs to him, he surprises her and brings his claws to her stomach, earning him the opportunity to make a few more strikes before she can respond. But she has a healing factor just as good as his own and recovers quickly. Again, she tosses him across the room and stabs him in the back several times before tossing him on an iron net platform hanging above the tube. She stands below him and keeps stabbing him through the net in the back and neck until he uses his claws to cut the poles the platform is hung from, and it falls on her, locking her in the tube. Wolverine is still recovering from his injuries when she suddenly jumps at him from below and stabs him again. He sees the needles by the adamantium and manages to grab one of them and inject her with molten, liquefied adamantium metal. She immediately stops moving, and, while she was impaled by Wolverine, she broke free of Stryker's control, but there was now nothing she could do to save herself. Wolverine watches in horror as adamantium starts leaking from her eyes, nose, and ears until she falls backward into the water tank with a thud as the metal hardens in her body. He then sighs in relief. Outside, Stryker takes the cables keeping the helicopter on the ground off, but just then Wolverine shows up, punches him, and pops his claws in his arm. Logan yells at him for experimenting on him and stealing his life, but Stryker tells him that he volunteered for the procedure willingly. Wanting answers, Logan asks Stryker who he is, but Stryker tells him that he's nothing but a failed experiment, provoking Logan into digging his claws deeper into Stryker's arm. Stryker doesn't want the mutant to remember the work they did together. He was an animal then. He's an animal now, and Stryker just gave him claws. Suddenly, they hear an alarm going off, and then water bursts out of the dam. Logan asks Stryker what's happening, and Stryker tells him that the spillway is about to get flooded because he was trying to relieve the pressure. In an attempt to escape alive, Stryker says that it's too late for anyone who's inside to make it out, and offers him to come with him and get all the answers he wants. He's a survivor, always has been. Wolverine repeats Stryker's former words, saying he's just an animal with claws. If they die, he dies. He then pops his claws in Stryker's neck and ties him to the helicopter's leg with the cable before running back in. As the dam keeps breaking, shaking the whole structure, Jean tries scanning for Logan. Logan is running through the halls, desperate to save his friends. After saving Cyclops and Professor X, all the mutants run through the halls to the spillway, believing it to be their only escape. They get to the doors, but Logan pops out of a tunnel and pops his claws in a fuse box, closing the door before they'll get caught in the flood. It tells them that they don't want to go that way, and then water bursts through the cracks to confirm. Logan leads his friends to the other way out. Outside, the water stops leaking through the dam as they're redirected. The mutants rush out to the snow. Artie falls, and Logan carries him in his hands. To their shock and horror, the helicopter is already gone, taken by Magneto. Suddenly, the jet shows up, spinning uncontrollably in the air. Rogue is piloting and makes an emergency landing, crashing into the snow. Both her and Bobby seem scared to death and breathe heavily as their friends enter the jet. Kurt teleports Xavier inside. Logan, still carrying Artie, looks at the woods and goes to them instead of to the jet. In the woods, Logan comes face to face with Stryker, who is tied to a concrete wall by chains, one last time. Stryker says, "Who has the answers, Wolverine? Those people? That creature in your arms?" Looking at Artie, Wolverine puts him down, drops the dog tags Stryker fashioned for him years earlier, and informs Stryker that he would take his chances with him and left him to die by leaving him at the mercy of the collapsing dam. As Wolverine walks away, Stryker bellows after him that, "One day, someone will finish what I've started, Wolverine. One day, one day." Artie sticks out his blue tongue in reply. Wolverine and Artie Maddox were the last two people to see Stryker. Wolverine enters the jet and hands Artie to Bobby. Jean asks him if he's okay, and he says that he is now. Scott and Storm panic to realize that something's wrong and they can't take off. Rogue asks if anyone has seen John, and Jean answers after a short telepathic scan that he's with Magneto, to everyone's disappointment. The jet lost power, and just then the water burst out through the dam again, not handling the pressure. Jean, in the back, realizes she has to do something as she's their last hope. She looks at all her friends and leaves the jet without them noticing. After a few seconds, though, Xavier notices and calls her name, alarming Logan and Scott. Xavier says she's outside, and Scott and Logan rush to the exit. Jean telekinetically closes the door, keeping him inside, and activates the jet. Scott yells at Storm not to take off, but Jean does it for her. Jan uses one hand to keep the water from drowning the jet, and the other to free the jet's leg from the snow. Scott watches in misery, and Logan orders Kurt to get her, but Kurt says she's not letting him. As her last words of goodbye, Jean uses her telepathy to speak through Xavier's mouth, saying she knows what she's doing. This is the only way. Scott begs her not to do this, and she says goodbye. Her body and eyes glow orange as she manages to release the jet's leg and lift it into the air. She releases her telekinetic grip, letting the water drown her freely, and everybody grieves about her. Scott falls crying on Logan to the size of the tragedy. Everybody's overwhelmed, their throats choking with sorrow. The jet's flying above what is now a large sea. In Washington, Professor X freezes everyone in President McKenna's office, and the X-Men infiltrate it. Sky turns dark and lightning strike as the president sees the mutants standing in front of him, Storm's eyes glowing white. The lighting is the only thing to light their faces. He's scared to see his attacker, Nightcrawler, among them. Professor X greets the president good morning and calms him down, saying they won't harm anyone. The president asks who they are, and Xavier answers that they're mutants, and his name is Charles Xavier. Rogue puts some documents down on the president's desk, and Xavier explains that they were taken from the private office of William Stryker. The president asks how they got it, and the professor answers that he knows a little girl who can walk through walls. The president says that he's never seen this information, and Xavier says he knows that. The president says he doesn't respond well to threats, and Xavier says that this is not a threat. This is an opportunity. There are forces in this world, he says, both human and mutant alike, who believe that a war is coming. As he can see from the files, some had already tried to start one, and there have been casualties and losses on both sides. He ends by telling the president that what he's about to tell the world is true. This is a moment to repeat the mistakes of the past or to work together for a better future. They're there to stay. The next move is his. Logan says that they'll be watching as lightning brightens all their faces, and suddenly they disappear and all the lights turn on again. The president is silent, not sure what to tell the cameras. In Xavier's study, Scott is looking out the window. Xavier says that even when Jean was a student, she was always hesitant about her powers, always looking to others, fearing that in some way she was left behind. Scott asks in a choked throat if they could have done more to save her, and Xavier says that in the past, she may have let them. Logan can't understand why she left the plane, and Xavier says that she made a choice. Students walk into the classroom, including Artie, Jones, and Bobby. Logan and Scott leave, and Logan tells Scott that Jean did make a choice, and it was Scott. Scott walks away, not finding that much comfort in it. Sometime later, some of the X-Men and the students are fighting in some apocalyptic battle. Enemy fire blasts buildings around them, and everything's in flames. The students are running through the chaos, and Storm flies, avoiding getting hit. Rogue and Colossus are about to get hit by a huge flying rock, but he turns to steel and stands in its way, sending the rock flying in Wolverine's direction, hitting him in the head. Logan simply heals himself and looks at his students in disappointment. The world is turning to hell, and they just pretty much sit around. He calls them to follow him, and they run after him. Logan nonchalantly uses a burning log to flame his cigar, just as Storm rushes to him in panic, telling him that the students are getting killed out there. He agrees, saying they're not ready. Storm pushes him away in the last moment before getting blasted, and he gets annoyed that he lost his last cigar. They realize that the enemy is flying straight at them at high speed from the sky, and Logan gives up on his students. He pops his claws and calls to Colossus, telling him to throw him at the enemy. Colossus turns to steel again and tosses Wolverine at the enemy, despite Storm's objections. A big clash is heard, and then a destroyed Sentinel head falls from the sky, with Logan on it. The enemy is disengaged, and Wolverine dismisses the class. The danger room returns to normal as Logan compliments Peter on his throw. As they exit the danger room, Storm angrily tells Wolverine that he can't just change the rules. She's trying to teach them something. Logan argues that he taught them something, but she states that it was a defensive exercise. He answers that the best defense is a good offense. Or was it the other way around? She tells him it isn't a game, but he tells her to go to Scott if she's got a problem. In the hallway, Scott walks past Logan. Wolverine tells Cyclops that they were waiting for him downstairs, but he didn't show up. Scott asks why does he care, and Logan answers that he has to cover for him. Scott says he didn't ask him to, but Wolverine tells him the professor did. Cyclops tries to brush Logan off and walk away, but Logan holds him and says he knows how he feels about Jean's death, but maybe it's time for them to move on. Scott just walks away, telling Logan that not everybody heals as fast as him. Later, when Beast arrives at the X mansion and reunites with Storm and Professor X, Logan walks in and asks, "Who's the furball?" Hank introduces himself as Secretary of Mutant Affairs, and Logan sarcastically compliments him on his suit. Xavier introduces Logan to Hank, but Beast has already heard of Wolverine. Storm interrupts and says Magneto will definitely come to get Mystique, but Beast says Magneto's not the problem, at least not the most pressing one. He tells the X-Men that a major pharmaceutical company has developed a mutant antibody, a way to suppress the mutant X gene. They're calling it a cure. For a moment, everybody is quiet, taking in the news, until Storm breaks the silence, saying that's ridiculous. They can't cure being a mutant. Since when have they become a disease? Xavier stops her, sensing that they're announcing it now. In the other room, Storm asks, "Who would want this cure? What kind of coward will take it just to fit in?" Beast asks if it's cowardice to save oneself from persecution, reminding her that not all of them can fit in so easily. Wolverine suggests that the government helped cook this up, but Beast assures him that the government had nothing to do with it. Logan argues that he heard that before, and Hank angrily tells him he's been fighting for mutant rights since before Logan had claws. Rogue walks in abruptly and interrupts their argument, asking if it's true that they can cure them. Xavier admits it appears to be true, but Storm refuses to accept it, saying they can't cure them because there's nothing to cure. There's nothing wrong with Rogue, or with any of them for that matter. In Xavier's school, the professor senses Cyclops' distress. Telepathically, Scott's name is heard all over the school. Clearly, Something is horribly wrong. Wolverine and Storm run through the halls hysterically to Xavier's office, not knowing what the hell happened. They burst open his door and ask if he's okay, and he tells them to get to Alkali Lake. Back in Alkali Lake, a short while later, the Blackbird descends into the heavy fog and lands. Wolverine and Storm step out carefully and start walking around, though none of them really wants to be there. Logan says he can't see a damn thing, but Storm says she can take care of that. Her eyes begin to glow white, and the thick fog fades away. In front of their amazed eyes, the two X-Men see small rocks, leaves, and drops of water floating around in the air. They split up to explore, and then Logan finds another thing, a pair of glasses floating with all the other things. He grabs them and realizes that it's Scott's ruby glasses, but before he can do anything else, Storm's scream catches his attention, and he rushes to her. He finds Storm sitting on the ground, near Jean Grey's still-alive body. Later, in the school's infirmary, Logan and Professor X are at Jean's side. Xavier tells Logan that the sheer mass of the water that collapsed on top of Jean should have obliterated her completely. The only explanation for her survival is that her powers wrapped her up in a cocoon of telekinetic energy. Logan asks if she'll be okay, and Xavier says that Jean Grey is the only Class 5 mutant he has ever encountered, and her potential is practically limitless. Her mutation is seeded in the unconscious part of her mind, posing a danger. When she was a girl, Xavier built several psychic barriers in her mind to isolate her powers from her conscious mind, and as a result, Jean developed a dual personality. The conscious Jean, whose powers were always in her control, and the dormant side, a personality that came to call itself the Phoenix, a purely instinctual creature. Taking this in, Wolverine asks Xavier if Jean knew all this. Xavier answers that it's unclear how much she knew, but far more critical is whether the woman in front of them is the Jean Grey they know, or the Phoenix, furiously struggling to be free. Logan says she looks pretty peaceful to him, but Xavier says that's because he's keeping her that way, trying to restore the psychic blocks to cage the beast again. Thinking this is too much, Logan angrily asks the professor what he's done to Jean. They're talking about a person's mind here. Xavier asks Wolverine to understand that Jean has to be controlled, but Logan tells him that sometimes when you cage the beast gets angry. The professor tells Logan he has no idea what Jean is capable of, but Logan corrects him that he has no idea what the professor is capable of. Xavier explains that he had a terrible choice to make, and he chose the lesser of two evils. Logan answers that it sounds to him like John had no choice at all. Charles gives up and says he doesn't have to explain himself, least of all to Wolverine, and continues to work on Jean's mind. Angry, Logan walks out. In the school's infirmary, Logan is standing at Jean's side. Some sort of mental helmet is attached to her head, reading her brain waves. He touches her shoulder softly, and suddenly she moves her hand sharply and grabs his hand. She removes the helmet telekinetically and opens her eyes slowly. He calls her name and welcomes her back, and she reminds him it's where they first met, only he was in her place, and she was in his. Logan asks if she's okay, and she says she's more than okay. Jean slowly sits up and removes all medical instruments from herself. Jean smiles and tells Logan he's making her blush, and he asks if she's reading his thoughts. She sits up on the table and leans closer to him, telling him that it's okay. They then start kissing. Jean does not appear to be quite her normal self, and her face takes on a very forceful expression. Several open wounds start appearing on Logan's body out of nowhere. Logan is obviously in great pain, but Jean scratches his arm painfully, which causes a large gash. Worried, Logan then stops and says, "Wait!" Jean's forceful expression does not leave, and she does not tone it down. It is obvious now that Jean is causing the open gashes to appear all over Logan's body using her telekinetic powers. Logan jumps off the table, telling Jean this isn't her, but she sits up and says it is. Logan is now thoroughly concerned. He backs away from her and suggests she take it easy, saying the professor said she might be a little different. Hearing Xavier's name, Jean turns cold and sarcastically says the professor would know, suggesting he's in their heads all the time. She tells Logan that Xavier tamed him, but Logan realizes that the professor was right and that the woman in front of him is not the Jean he knows. Now very worried about Cyclops' safety, Logan asks Jean, "Where's Scott?" For a moment, Jean snaps back to her usual self, asking Logan where she is. Logan tells her she's in the mansion and says he needs to know what happened to Scott. Confused, Jean remains silent and just looks around the room. Logan holds out Scott's glasses and repeats the question. Seeing the glasses, Jean starts to remember how she came out of the water earlier and saw Scott. She closes her eyes, and suddenly her room begins to shake, and the glasses break to pieces in Logan's hand. Jean's face remains a confused, dazed stare in the air as the entire room shakes violently. Logan grabs Jean and tells her to stay with him and talk to him. He yells at her to look at him and focus, but she closes her eyes, her mind tortured by the personality struggle in her head. She then cries and begs Logan to kill her before she kills someone else, but he doesn't want to hear it. He tells her they can help her. The professor can fix it. He can help. This suggestion snaps Jean again, and she says she doesn't want to fix it and tosses Logan at the wall forcefully. Wolverine gets unconscious, the Phoenix gets up from the table, tears the massive steel door open telekinetically, and walks out. Storm and Professor X rush in to find Wolverine still unconscious on the floor. Storm wakes Logan and asks him what happened, and he asks where Jean is. Worried that his greatest fear has come true, Xavier asks Logan what he has done. Logan tells them that he thinks Jean killed Scott, but Storm says that's not possible. Furious, Xavier tells Logan he warned him and tries to scan for Jean telepathically. He finds out that she left the mansion, but she's trying to block his thoughts. She's so strong, he tells them. It may be too late. Not long later, outside Gray's residence, a car stops. Out of it step the 3 X-Men, and Xavier tells Logan and Storm to wait for him outside. He needs to see Jean alone. Magneto shows up in front of them and tells Charles he was right. This one is special. Wolverine asks Eric what he's doing there, and Magneto answers, "Same as the professor, visiting an old friend." Xavier tells Eric that he doesn't want trouble there, and Eric answers that neither does him. Magneto offers. They go inside, and the two continue towards the house. Outside, the X-Men and the Brotherhood watch as the white gate shuts itself. Logan says he's going in, but Storm stops him, reminding him the professor told them to wait outside. Hearing the noise from outside, Logan decides that's it and pops his claws, ready to fight his way through the Brotherhood. Juggernaut responds by putting his helmet on, and the two of them start running straight at each other. Storm uses her wind powers to fly up to the sky, also preparing to battle. Juggernaut easily gains the upper hand, dropping Wolverine to the ground. He then proceeds to grab Logan and toss him into the house through the front window. Logan lands on the dining table, smashing it to pieces. Juggernaut keeps hitting and kicking Wolverine and tossing him around through the house, wrecking everything in his way. Juggernaut and Callisto continue to make short work of the X-Men, ruining the house and smashing the walls. For a second, Wolverine manages to slash Juggernaut with his claws and distract him, but it doesn't help much. Wolverine starts using his claws to move around, sticking them into the ceiling and pulling himself towards the living room, struggling with Jean's telekinesis, which keeps him glued to the ceiling. He manages to get to the door and open it, arriving just in time to see Charles Xavier's whole body starting to move, as if his very skin is blowing in the wind like waves. Logan and Eric watch helplessly and in disbelief from opposite sides as Jean Grey uses her powers on her former mentor. Suddenly, between all of the mess and the noise and the objects flying around, there is a moment of silence felt only by Jean and Xavier, as if time is moving in slow motion just for the two of them for a few seconds. Knowing these are probably his last words, Charles Xavier smiles and tells Jean to not let it control her. Then, in a second, the unbelievable happens. In front of Wolverine and Magneto's astonished eyes, Professor Charles Xavier's body blows up and vanishes into thin air. Then, after Magneto and Jean leave, Logan and Storm run into what used to be the living room, but find just an empty wheelchair. They look at each other with tears in their eyes and heavy breaths, realizing that their beloved mentor is gone. Logan drops to his knees, helpless, yelling, "No!" Storm breaks down in tears and falls on his back, hugging him. The two powerful X-Men are left alone in the wrecked house in front of an empty wheelchair, sobbing. The day after, in Xavier's mansion, the wheelchair is resting in Xavier's room. Outside, in the front yard, Storm is eulogizing Charles Xavier in a memorial service in front of all his students. "We live in an age of darkness," she says, "a world full of fear, hate, and intolerance. But at every age, there are those who fight against it. Charles Xavier was born into a world divided, a world he tried to heal, a mission he never saw accomplished. It seems the destiny of great men is to see their goals unfulfilled." In the crowd sit many students and friends of Xavier's. Logan isn't sitting with them as he is standing and listening from afar. Rogue looks at him as Storm continues her eulogy. "Charles was more than a leader, more than a teacher. He was a friend. When we were afraid, he gave us strength, and when we were alone, he gave us a family. He may be gone, but his teachings live on through us, his students." Storm finishes, and all the other people present stand up, walk to his memorial, and put a flower on it. Frustrated with her inability to touch her boyfriend, Rogue packs a bag and walks out of her room. On her way out, she is found by Logan, who asks her if she needs a lift. She says no, and he asks her where she's going. Thinking he'll try to stop her, she starts telling him he doesn't know what it's like to be afraid of your own powers, to be afraid to get close to anybody. He tells her he does, and she goes on to explain that she wants to be able to touch people, to feel a hug, a handshake, or a kiss. Logan says he hopes she's not doing it for some boy, and she remains silent, not sure what to say. He tells her if she wants to go, she can go, as long as she's sure it's what she wants. Puzzled, Rogue asks if he's not supposed to tell her to go upstairs and unpack, but he explains that he's not her father, he's her friend. He tells Rogue to think about what he said, and she corrects him that her name is Marie. He walks away, and she continues on her way out. Back in the school, Wolverine, Storm, Beast, Iceman, and Kitty gather to decide about the school's future. Hank thinks Professor Xavier started this school, and perhaps it's best that it ends with him. He tells Bobby they'll have to tell all the students they'll have to go home, but Bobby says most of them have no home to go to. He thinks they should fight for this school. Before anyone can respond, a young man walks in. It's Warren Worthington, the mutant angel. He apologizes for coming at a bad time, but he was told this is a safe place for mutants. Beast sadly tells him it was, but Storm corrects him that it still is. She tells Warren they'll find him a room and tells Hank to tell all the students the school stays open, much to Iceman's delight. Outside, Logan walks to Xavier's memorial. Suddenly, he hears Jean's voice whispering his name in his head repeatedly. He jumps and turns around to see where it's coming from, and it just keeps getting louder and louder. He calls her name, and visions of the forest pop into his mind along with her voice. Logan then falls to his knees, holding his stomach in pain as Jean's voice continues to echo in his mind. Then it stops, and he looks up at Xavier's face sculptured in the memorial. Immediately, he leaves to prepare to take off. Storm finds him and asks where he's off to, telling him Jean's gone, and she's not coming back. Logan says Storm doesn't know that, but she reminds him that Jean is the one who killed the professor. Wolverine argues that it wasn't Jean. The Jean he knows is still in there. Storm asks him why he can't see the truth and lets Jean go, and when he doesn't answer, she says it's because he loves her. She tells him Jean made her choice, and now it's time they make theirs. If he's with them, she says, then he should be with them. Having finished what she had to say, Storm then leaves the room. Wolverine chooses not to listen, though, and leaves the mansion on his motorcycle. Wolverine arrives at the forest where the Brotherhood is camped, with the help of his hypersenses. He sniffs around to find the exact location. When he locks on a specific direction, he pops his claws and starts running, but is stopped a few feet later by two large spikes shot at his shoulders. He falls back, wounded, but quickly gets back up to his feet to see his attacker. It is a Brotherhood member called Spike, who seems ready to attack again. Logan starts running away, dodging the many spikes shot at him at dazzling speed. Not far away, another Brotherhood member with increased hearing hears the spikes shooting and realizes something's up. Along with a few more mutants, he heads to help Spike. Spike keeps running after Logan and shooting him, not letting go of his opponent. Logan hides behind a tree to rest for a second and uses his claws to get the spike out of his shoulder. He waits for Spike to make another move and then jumps out of his hiding, sending one of Spike's spikes flying back at him with the help of his claws. Spike is hit and falls down, but Logan knows it's not the end of it, sensing more mutants coming. He hurries to climb the tree and wait, and then jumps down and surprises the Brotherhood mutants. Before they realize what's going on, he takes them down one by one in a berserker rage, slashing them with his claws. Spike gets up and throws another spike at Wolverine, but Logan blocks it with his claws and starts running towards Spike, blocking more and more spikes on his way. As they get closer to each other, they jump at one another. Wolverine gets up with two spikes stuck in his stomach. Still, he's victorious, as Spike is in much worse shape. Logan retreats his claws and takes out the spikes, and then continues to the Brotherhood's camp. In the camp, Magneto is giving a speech to the others. Logan arrives in the middle of it and steals a cloak from one of the tents to cover himself. Magneto tells his followers that the humans wish to cure them, but he says to them that the mutants are the cure. Everyone cheers, and Magneto goes on, saying they are the cure for that imperfect condition called Homo sapiens. Humans have their weapons, and mutants have theirs, he says as he looks at Phoenix. They'll strike with a vengeance and a fury this world has never witnessed, and if any mutants stand in their way, they will use the cure against them. Logan stands in the crowd and listens as Magneto details his plan. They will go to Alcatraz Island, take control of the cure, and destroy its source, and then nothing can stop them. Phoenix, standing behind Magneto, spots Wolverine in the crowd, and he notices she saw him. She walks aside, and he does the same, getting away from the camp. He sees her walking away and calls her name. She looks at him, but doesn't have time to say a word, as Magneto arrives and tosses Logan into a large tree. Magneto tells Logan that he knows the smell of adamantium a mile away. Logan says he didn't come to fight Magneto, he came for Jean. Eric asks if Wolverine thinks he's keeping Jean against her will, and when Logan doesn't answer, he tells him she's there because she wants to be. He holds Wolverine in the air with his powers, and Logan tells him he doesn't know what he's dealing with. Magneto answers that he knows full well. He saw what she did to Charles. Wolverine says he's not leaving without Jean, but Magneto thinks otherwise and uses his powers to send Logan flying far away. Wolverine eventually stops when he hits a tall tree and falls to the ground, beaten and injured. Later, back in the school, Wolverine runs in after his encounter with Magneto and calls for Storm hysterically. He finds her, and she asks him what he's doing back there. He tells her he needs help. He found Jean with Magneto, and they're on the move, and he knows where they're going. Beast joins them, asking Logan if he really saw Magneto. Logan tells them he has, and they must go now, before the Brotherhood attacks Alcatraz. Hank reminds him that the government's got troops stationed out there, but Wolverine doesn't think it's enough to stop Magneto. As they walk hurriedly to get set, Angel overhears them, realizing his father's in danger and needs help. A few minutes later, Beast and Wolverine are already in uniform in the mansion's tunnels. Logan tells Hank that if Magneto gets hold of the cure, he'll be unstoppable. Hank asks how many Magneto has, and Logan says he has an army. They meet up with Storm, Iceman, Kitty, and Colossus, and Bobby reminds Logan that there are only 6 of them. Wolverine pauses and tells the young students that he won't lie to them. They're outnumbered. They lost Scott, they lost the professor, but if they don't fight now, everything these men stood for will die with them, and he's not going to let that happen. Iceman nods in agreement, and Logan says they stand together, X-Men, all of them. Bobby looks at Kitty and Peter, and they both sign they're ready. He then turns back to Logan and tells him they're in. Ready for the battle of their lives, the X-Men walk towards the Blackbird. On the way, Wolverine tells Storm that the kids are ready. She agrees, but asks him if he's ready to do what he has to do when the time comes. Not knowing what to say, they just board the Blackbird and take off, heading to San Francisco. In the back, the 3 kids sit in silence, but are ready to fight for their future. The Blackbird is approaching the battle scene at high speed, and the X-Men are amazed to see the Golden Gate Bridge, and what's happening, it's worse than they ever dreamed of. Callisto senses something's coming. It's the X-Men's Blackbird landing on the roof. Lightning falls on the battle scene as Storm descends from the sky. Next, Beast jumps from the roof and lands like a true animal. Iceman and Kitty jump together, phasing into the ground to avoid getting squashed, and then phasing right back up. Colossus jumps down too, his metal form protecting him. Lastly, Wolverine jumps down the wall, using his claws to scratch the wall and slow down his fall. Storm lands too, and Wolverine yells to the humans to go back and lock the doors. He then orders the X-Men to stand together and hold a line. Instantly, the 6 mutants line up in front of the Brotherhood to form a strict line of defense, ready for the battle of their lives. On the hill, Magneto looks at the X-Men, whispering to himself that they're traitors to their own cause. Enraged, he then orders his Brotherhood to finish them. Magneto's army immediately charges forward at the X-Men. Wolverine slashes a light pole with his claws, and it drops on the charging Brotherhood, killing some of them. The battle begins, with Wolverine and Beast succeeding to take down Brotherhood members rather quickly with their furious animal attacks. Up on the hill, Magneto tells Juggernaut to go inside and find the boy and kill him. Juggernaut says he'll do it with pleasure and runs towards the building, letting nothing stand in his way. Wolverine sees him run straight through the wall, and Beast realizes he's going for the boy. "Not if I get there first," Kitty replies, and she runs in the same direction, phasing through anything in her way. A mutant named Starfish has the ability to grow back his organs and attacks Wolverine. Logan tries to slash him like he did with all the other mutants, but it's no use, as the mutant quickly grows back his slashed arms every time and hits Wolverine when he's not ready. Having had enough, Logan kicks the mutant in the groin, and he finally falls down. "Grow those back," Logan says as he moves on to his next opponent. Beast and Wolverine both go into berserker rages and take down Brotherhood members in large numbers. Logan tells Beast he thought Hank was a diplomat. Hank explains that there comes a time when all men must. He stops mid-sentence to beat up some more mutants and just yells to Logan, "Oh, you get the point." Up on the hill, Magneto tells Pyro it's time to end this war. He uses his powers to lift a car from the bridge behind them and throw it at the battle scene, with Pyro torching it along the way. The flaming car lands and explodes, and everyone runs away. Wolverine yells to the X-Men to take cover as Magneto continues on to the second attempt with another torched car. He keeps on going with more and more cars, each time Pyro torches the cars halfway before they explode. Storm finds cover behind a column, but is almost hit. She continues on to a better cover, along with Wolverine and the others. Near them, they see one of the cure guns. Looking at the apocalyptic view around them, the place in ruins, cars exploding all around them, the X-Men must make a decision. Wolverine reminds Storm of what she told him in the Danger Room session earlier. They work as a team. She, in turn, reminds him of what he answered. Best defense is a good offense. Logan turns to Bobby and asks him if he thinks he can take down his old friend Pyro. Bobby nods and runs out of the cover, using his ice powers to freeze one of the flying cars in the air, turning off the flames before it explode. Wolverine tells Storm he'll need some cover for his next move, and she understands perfectly, using her powers to create some fog. Magneto and Phoenix, the only ones left on the hill, are looking around to find the rest of the X-Men, but the fog keeps them from it. Wolverine spots Magneto through the fog and points him up to Colossus. Just like in the Danger Room, Colossus grabs Wolverine and spins him around, tossing him at Magneto. It fails, though, as Magneto sees Wolverine and uses his powers to stop Logan. Logan falls to the ground and slides on his stomach, stopping right before Magneto's legs. Eric then flips Logan on his back, telling him he never learns. "Actually," Wolverine answers, "I do." Just then, Beast jumps at Magneto from behind and injects him with the cure they took from the gun. Magneto drops to his knees, realizing he's now human, and then falls back. Rolling on the ground, he tells Jean in a shaking voice that this is what the other humans and the X-Men want for them. "It's over, Jean," Logan says to his loved one, the last Brotherhood member left standing. The moment is broken, though, when the soldiers use the silence to shoot at her with the cure guns. Logan yells at them not to shoot, but it's too late. Jean stops the shots telekinetically and turns around, saying it's not over. Wolverine cries "No!" as Phoenix levitates into the air and blows up all the light poles. Again, a telekinetic storm is starting to rage. Beast yells for everybody to run out of the building and escape, and they all flee in panic. Kitty and Leech get out of the building and find Iceman, and together they run away. Staring at Phoenix's madness, Eric mumbles, "What have I done?" Frightened, he then joins the others fleeing to the bridge. Storm runs up to Wolverine, and he tells her he's the only one who can stop Phoenix. He orders her to get everyone to safety and leave, and she flies to the sky. He cries out to Jean, but she doesn't respond. Seeing the destruction around him, Logan calls Jean's name again, saying he knows she's still somewhere inside Phoenix's body. He starts walking towards Phoenix, but she holds him back with her powers. Still, he struggles to walk slowly through it. Only a few feet are left between them, Phoenix standing on the top of the hill and Wolverine a little below. He struggles to climb, sticking his claws to the ground to move. Eventually, he manages to get to her and stand in front of her. Amazed that he fought his way through and got to her, Phoenix opens her mouth for the first time since she laid foot on Alcatraz Island, asking Logan if he'll really die for them. "No," he answers. "Not for them. For you." Hearing this, the Jean Grey part of her personality rises back for a moment, and she begs him in tears to save her. He tells her he loves her, and then he does what he knows he has to. What she asked him to do before in the infirmary, he pops his claws in her gut, killing the woman he loves. In her dying breath, Jean looks at him in silence and smiles. Her body falls to his arms, and he cries. The next day, in another room, Logan watches the president on TV giving a speech in the White House. "So it is with the thanks of a grateful nation that I introduce our new ambassador to the United Nations and a representative to the world for all United States citizens, human and mutant alike, Dr. Hank McCoy." The president then shakes Hank's hand. "Way to go, furball," Logan thinks to himself. He then walks out and looks at the school that he and Storm are now left in charge of. Sometime after 2006, Logan returned to the Canadian wilderness. In addition, he also regained the lost memories he lost in 1979. Living in the forest, he only visits the town for necessary supplies. Haunted and guilt-ridden by Jean Grey's death, as well as the memories of the deaths and war he encountered in his past, Logan again seeks the quiet life, attempting to renounce his life of violence. After getting into a fight with some men at a bar, Yukio tracks his whereabouts and takes him to Japan to see the man he saved from the Nagasaki bombing in 1945, who is now the head of the Yashida Corporation. Logan meets Yashida, who wants to return the favor by taking his immortality away from him and giving it to himself, who is dying of cancer. After Logan refuses, he meets his son, Shingen Yashida, and his granddaughter, Mariko Yashida. That night, while Logan dreams of Jean, Viper injects a robotic parasite into his body, affecting his healing ability. During the night, Yukio informs him of Yashida's death. The next morning, he attends the funeral of Yashida, where he saves Mariko from Yakuza assassins with the help of Kenichiro Harada. Wolverine gets shot multiple times and finds he is not healing as quickly as before. After getting Mariko to safety, Wolverine follows her onto a bullet train where he encounters more Yakuza assassins and kills them before they hide in a local motel. He stands guard in the rain while Mariko sleeps and soon passes out from his injuries after having a hallucination of Jean. He awakens to find Mariko getting the motel owner's grandson, a veterinarian, to stitch him up. Logan and Mariko then hide in Yashida's house in southern Japan, and as they start to fall for each other, Logan reveals moments from his past, such as the war and Jean. Yukio then has a vision of Logan dying with blood everywhere and his heart in his hand, not beating. She attempts to warn him, but is too late, as Mariko is captured by the Yakuza, who, after intimidating him, is revealed to be hired by Mariko's fiancé, the corrupt Chief of Justice Noburo Mori. After Logan and Yukio confront Noburo at his luxury apartment, he reveals that Shingen had hired the kidnapping before being thrown off by Logan and landing in a pool. Wolverine and Yukio arrive at Yashida's home in Tokyo, where he finds the parasite on his heart. He starts to extract it when Shingen enters, with Yukio defending Wolverine. He dies in the process, but has his healing ability restored, and after returning to life, he eventually kills Shingen. Yukio and Wolverine then follow Harada and Viper to the Yashida Research Center in northern Japan to find Mariko, where Wolverine is attacked by Harada and the Yashida family's ninja clan. He is then placed in a machine created by Viper, where she reveals the plans to extract his immortality and introduces her associate, the Silver Samurai, who cuts through Wolverine's claws. Mariko escapes from Harada and manages to direct the machine Logan is in into the Silver Samurai's sword strike, breaking it and freeing him. The Silver Samurai, who is revealed as Yashida, drills through his adamantium claws and extracts his immortality. Mariko then stabs him as Wolverine's bone claws start to grow back. Yashida takes a final stab at Wolverine and falls to his death. After passing out, Wolverine has one more hallucination of Jean and moves on from her death. Later, Logan says goodbye to Mariko, now CEO of the Yashida Corporation, as Yashida has already claimed her as the new CEO, and boards a plane with Yukio, who reminds him that she is still his bodyguard. When Yukio says to Wolverine that they can go wherever they want to, they depart somewhere unknown. 2 years later, in 2015, Logan is at an airport and is approached by Magneto and Charles Xavier about a new threat to wipe out all mutants. In some point between 2015 and 2023, Logan's bone claws were once again coated in adamantium, presumably with Magneto's help. 8 years later, Wolverine, Storm, Professor X and Magneto arrive to find their fellow Free Mutants in China, where they plan to send Wolverine back to 1973 to stop Mystique from killing Bolivar Trask, which triggered the Sentinel program. Because of his healing abilities, he is the only one who can physically and mentally survive the trip. Shadowcat sends him back to his younger body, and he wakes up in 1973 next to a woman where 3 men shoot at him. Wolverine then kills them and goes to find Professor X. Wolverine then goes to the X Mansion, where he has a rough encounter with Hank. Wolverine finally sees Charles and asks for his help, who reluctantly agrees. They plan to break Magneto out of prison for killing President John Kennedy. The 3 first head to Peter Maximoff's house and ask him to help. At the Pentagon, Charles, Wolverine, Quicksilver, and Hank sneak into the facility and free Eric. While pursuing and capturing Mystique, Wolverine discovers William Stryker and has traumatic flashbacks. In 2023, Wolverine starts violently shaking and accidentally slashes Shadowcat in the rib with his claws. Back in 1973, he briefly did not know why he was there and who young Charles was. Later, when a depressed Charles is unable to use Cerebro to find Mystique, Logan has him use his mind as a bridge to his future self, allowing the two Charles Xaviers to communicate through him. The future Charles Xavier convinces his past self not to give up, and he is able to use Cerebro once more. As Wolverine, Professor X, and Hank go to the unveiling of the Sentinels to find Mystique, the Sentinels begin attacking the public. Magneto lifts an entire stadium and transports it to surround the White House, puts all but one Sentinel on the lookout, and makes it go after Wolverine and Beast. Wolverine attacks it, but Magneto stabs him with reinforcement steel and then drowns him in a nearby river. While Wolverine is incapacitated, his actions lead to the past, Charles Xavier finishing what he started and changing the future. Back in 2023, the Sentinels are close to firing upon the X-Men, but everyone disappears after Shadowcat finally breaks the connection, causing Wolverine's changes to the timeline to take effect. Having successfully altered the timeline, Wolverine awakens in the Xavier Institute in the new future at precisely the same time he was sent back in time, to find Shadowcat, Rogue, Iceman, Colossus, Beast, Professor X, and to his shock, Cyclops and Jean Grey alive again. Wolverine visits Professor X and reveals he has just finished time traveling and asks what happened in the last 50 years, apparently possessing no memory of the events of the new timeline. A delighted Professor X tells him they have a lot to catch up on. So in the new timeline, through unknown means, Wolverine is captured and subjected to the Weapon X program by the real Stryker at Alkali Lake, gaining an adamantium skeleton in the process. He was shown with a harness, headgear, and some cords pierced into his torso, designed to brainwash him into a living weapon for Stryker to command. The effect of the brainwashing turned Wolverine feral and primal, causing him to become instinctively aggressive and berserk. When Cyclops, Jean Grey, and Nightcrawler infiltrate the facility to rescue their captured friends from Stryker, Jean discovers Wolverine's containment unit and telepathically learns of his condition. She telekinetically unlocks the unit in an attempt to take out some incoming guards, resulting in the seemingly mindless mutant going on a violent rampage that leaves multiple personnel slaughtered. Upon reaching the exit, Cyclops, Jean, and Nightcrawler confront Wolverine. But as Wolverine and Cyclops are about to engage, John stops them and telepathically tells Wolverine she can help him. Jean takes off the helmet, puts her hands on Wolverine's head, and partially restores his memories, which makes him remember that his name is Logan. With no words, the mutant removes his additional gear and flees into the wilderness. Then, over the next 40 years, Logan would spend time as an assassin, later retiring, becoming a cage fighter, and becoming addicted to barbiturates. He would ultimately be found by Professor X and taken in by him and the X-Men, turning his life around. Then, in 2028, Charles Xavier would develop Alzheimer's and suffer a massive seizure that injured 600 people and killed several members of the X-Men. Logan would take Charles to a place in Mexico near the US border. He would also ask for the assistance of Caliban to help care for Charles. In 2029, Logan is working as a limo driver and has started going by his birth name, James Howlett, where he escorts all types of people from businessmen to high schoolers, hoping to save up enough money that he can buy a boat and take Charles, himself, and Caliban out to sea, where they will not have to worry about Charles's seizures hurting anyone. One day, Logan is approached by Gabriella, a nurse for Transigen, who asks him to escort her and an 11-year-old girl, Laura, to a place in North Dakota called Eden. Logan is later met by Donald Pierce, Transigen's cybernetically enhanced chief of security, who offers him a job to find Gabriella and Laura for him, but he refuses. After some time, Logan decides to reluctantly accept the job for Gabriella, only to find out that she has been murdered. Returning home and intent on getting Charles to safety, Logan is met by Donald Pierce once again, but knocked out by Laura, who snuck into his car on the way back. Logan gives Caliban the responsibility of dropping Pierce off on the side of the road as he gets Charles ready. However, Pierce returns with his cybernetic enhanced enforcers, the Reavers, and Caliban is captured. But Logan and Laura manage to escape them. Later, Logan and Xavier learn through a video on Gabriella's phone that Transigen was breeding mutant children with DNA samples from several mutants for the X-23 project, but found they were difficult to control as they grew up. Upon completion of the X-24 project, the children were deemed unnecessary and were to be put to death. Gabriella helped several children escape from the Transigen compound before smuggling Laura across the border. Furthermore, Laura is revealed to be Logan's daughter, as she was bred with his DNA when he escaped from Alkali Lake in 1983. The group decides to stay at a hotel in Oklahoma City. While there, Logan discovers that Eden doesn't exist and is just a place referenced in one of the X-Men comic books that Laura brought with her. While Logan is out, the Reavers find their whereabouts, but Xavier suffers another seizure and freezes everyone in the hotel with a psychic blast, forcing Logan to painfully roam through the hotel. Making his way up, Logan kills the several Reavers surrounding Charles and injects Xavier with a suppressant before they leave the city, with the overall ordeal leaving hundreds injured and dozens dead. The trio is given shelter by a local family, the Munsons, after helping them round up their horses during a highway incident. When a pipe bursts on the family's property, Logan and Will Munson go to fix it, where Logan drives off some harassers of the Munsons. While they are out, X-24, a feral clone of Wolverine without his own healing factor and a weaker adamantium skeleton, stabs Xavier through the chest, fatally wounding him, and slaughters Will's wife and son. And when they return, Will himself is mortally wounded. X-24 then captures Laura. Logan arrives and finds the injured Xavier, who dies shortly after. So Logan battles X-24, but is unable to overcome X-24's savagery. Caliban blows himself to let Laura and Logan escape by setting off 2 grenades, which destroy the van he is in. Will then appears and impales X-24 on the forepart of a combine harvester with his car, and then keeps shooting X-24 in the head with a shotgun before dying, allowing Logan and Laura to escape. After burying Xavier, an emotionally devastated Logan passes out and wakes up in a clinic, with the doctor attempting to convince him to get some treatment for his condition, but Logan refuses. Laura convinces Logan to take her to Eden, and after a loud argument, Logan gives in to show her it is not real. On the way there, Laura convinces Logan to sleep, and she drives them the rest of the way to Eden. Logan and Laura arrive at Eden, a safe haven run by Richter and the other Transigen test subjects who manage to escape. The children then put a weak and exhausted Logan to bed. Logan wakes up from the nightmares, and Laura asks him to say that he had a nightmare. Logan asks her a question, saying that she had nightmares, and she's right that people hurt everybody. Laura had something in his shirt, which was a bullet. Logan says that it was made out of adamantium, the same kind that's put inside of them, and it's probably what's killing them. Logan asks to hold this for him, which she does. The next morning, Laura and the children trim Logan's beard. When he wakes up, the children laugh at him. He walks up to the mirror and says that it's not funny. Logan then learns that the children plan to make a journey across the forest to the Canadian border, and he entrusts Laura to them. During their journey, the children are located and captured by the Reavers. Knowing the children need his help, Logan makes the fatal decision to use the serum left to him by Richter to restore his healing factor, which rapidly heals all his past scars and injuries, but also has dangerous side effects once it wears off. He makes his way to the children and begins slaughtering the Reavers, but the serum quickly wears off as he meets Xander Rice, the head of the Transigen project. Rice reveals that the destruction of mutant kind is due to a virus created by the Transigen project, in an effort to control the mutant population and create their own for weaponization. He also mentions that Logan killed his father during his escape from the Weapon X program in Alkali Lake. Logan shoots Rice dead, and Pierce releases X-24 on him, while the children wipe out the remaining Reavers before overwhelming Pierce and killing him. Logan and Laura proceed to fight X-24, with Richter using his seismic powers to lift the Earth under an armored truck and slam it on X-24. However, X-24 lifts the truck off of him and catches Logan off guard, fatally impaling him on a tree stump before Laura is able to kill X-24 with an adamantium bullet Logan had been holding onto if he ever wanted to kill himself. Now dying, Logan, with his last breaths, tells Laura to not be the weapon Transigen wanted her to be before dying in her arms. Laura and the children mourn his death. They bury him in Canada, his place of birth. She tearfully adjusts the cross on his grave and places it on its side, creating an X to honor her father as an X-Man and the Wolverine. His sacrifice saved the mutant race, meaning that mutants will be born again in the future. So yeah, that's all for this video, and if you guys enjoyed it, then make sure to get subscribed to the channel.